that's the founder of our institution. He translated this and explained it. The explanation, the commentary is called the purport. Just as a person traveling on the road rests one foot on the ground and then lifts the other, or as a worm on a vegetable transfers itself from one leaf and then gives up the previous one, the conditioned soul takes shelter of another body and gives up the one he had before. Purport. This is the process of the soul's transmigration from one body to another. At the time of death, according to his mental condition, the living being, is carried by the subtle body, consisting of mind, intelligence, and ego, to another gross body. When higher authorities have decided what kind of gross body the living entity will have, he is forced to enter such a body, and thus he automatically gives up his previous body. Dull-minded persons who do not have the intelligence to understand this process of transmigration take for granted that when the gross body is finished, one's life is finished forever. Such persons have no brains with which to understand the process of transmigration. At the present moment, there is great opposition to the Hare Krishna movement, which is being called a brainwashing movement. But actually, the so-called scientists, philosophers, and other leaders in the Western countries have no brains at all. The Hare Krishna movement is trying to elevate such foolish persons by enlightening their intelligence so that they will take advantage of the human body. Unfortunately, because of gross ignorance, they regard the Hare Krishna movement as a brainwashing movement. They do not know that without God consciousness, one is forced to continue transmigrating from one body to another. Because of their devilish brains, they will next be forced to accept an abominable life and practically never be able to liberate themselves from the conditional life of material existence. How this transmigration of the soul takes place is very clearly explained in this verse. So before I begin, should I introduce myself? I didn't do that because you don't know me. I joined this institution here. At the time it was in Evanston. That was in 1973, February. And in 1974, February, I went to India. And I've been living in India ever since. I'm just visiting right now. I don't reside here. What are my qualifications? I studied these Vedic literatures, that's all. I joined this institution when I was 17. So I didn't go through the modern higher educational system. At the present time, I'm living in Baroda, Gujarat, which is north of Bombay, which is where you're from. You know Baroda. They may not know. With the Prime Minister of India, who's like the President of the United States, is from our state, Gujarat, the present Prime Minister. Anyway, so here, the description of how the soul, which is within the body, which is our actual identity, according to the Vedic science, the ancient science of the Vedic literature of India, the soul at the time of death transmigrates from one body to another. How to understand that? Well, first we should understand the difference between conscious living beings and dead matter. The microphone is dead. The table is dead. The floor is dead. The building is dead. But we are alive. So there's 6 symptoms of life: birth, growth. We are born, then we grow, then we sustain our lives, then reproduction, which means progeny, then dwindling, getting old, like I'm an old man now, and, well, you can see my hair is gray, and then vanishing, death. So all the living entities have these 6 symptoms of life. Whether it's human beings, birds, aquatics, beasts, reptiles, insects, and plants and vegetables, trees, for instance. So now, according to the logic and the concept of transmigration of the soul, and this is explained in another book which you might have heard the name, Bhagavad Gita, right? So in Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse which was quoted in the previous verse to this, in the explanation by Prabhupada. Karana guna sangasya sad asad yoni janmasu. Because of our actions, it was explained here also. Karana, because of our actions, and the gunas, the modes of material nature. Karana guna sangasya, because we associate by performing different actions. Like an engineer is involved in building a building, or a carpenter is involved in building a desk. This is just an example of action. Intellectual action is a professor, and physical action, there's iron workers and steel workers and miners, and they perform some physical activity, work. And housewives perform work in the house. It's not like they're sitting all day and doing nothing. There's cleaning, cooking, looking after the children, the grandchildren. So we all do some type of action. But there's another factor besides the action, and that is the quality. What are these qualities? Goodness, passion, and ignorance, which are called in Sanskrit Sattvagun, Rajogun, and Tamogun, the 3 gunas. These gunas, these qualities are subtle. They are a subtle influence on the consciousness. Their effects are manifested in gross ways. For instance, this is a very gross example. Somebody who is a drunkard, who drinks alcohol excessively, will not be able to drive the car properly. He'll get in an accident and cause a considerable damage and even physical harm. So whoever drinks alcohol, we believe, is influenced by the mode of ignorance. For example, that's just an example. Or the drugs, right? In this country, there's a major drug problem that the government is fighting. What is it called? The opioid problem. You read about it in the news. So what is this opioid problem? You take an artificial substance which induces a false state of happiness, which is what alcohol does. Alcohol is another drug. So these influences are called the mode of ignorance. They induce a state of ignorance, an illusion. When you take a drug, you feel happy, but you neglect everything else. It puts you in a state of ignorance. So therefore, we don't take even caffeine, what to speak of marijuana, drugs, alcohol. No alcohol, because we want to develop the quality of goodness. And if you are influenced by the quality of ignorance and passion, it's very difficult to develop the quality of goodness. What's that verse in Gita? Sattvam sajjayati. Huh? Sattva sajjayate jnanam. Thank you. From the quality of goodness comes knowledge. Rajas lobha evacha. And from the quality of passion comes lobha, greed. When one is overly greedy, I want a Mercedes-Benz, right? Or whatever. I'm just giving a gross example. I want a pile of money. The lottery promises you a big pile of money, and we know some people win. In India, we have the lottery. We don't have the slot machines, right? The one-armed bandits. But these machines induce greed. And greed drives many conscious living beings, human beings. That is called the mode of passion. It's not the only thing, because rajas lobha evacha, not only greed but other such qualities. Tamas pramada moho tamaso lo ajnanam evacha. Okay, thank you. So from the mode of ignorance, tamas, comes pramada, illusion, which is brought about by intoxication. And that leads to the state of forgetfulness and ignorance. Well, ignorance, it's a double usage, double intender. Why are these things important? Because there are 4 aims of human life according to the Vedic concept, the Vedic religion. Dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. You've heard. These are the 4 goals of human life, char purusharthas. So dharma means to study Vedic literature in the childhood, especially brahmanas, kshatriyas, and vaishyas. And for those who are not brahmanas, kshatriyas, and vaishyas, there's the Mahabharata. Mahabharata is encapsulated Vedic knowledge for common men. So dharma, religious principles. If one is trained in religious principles in the childhood, he is much more likely, it is not guaranteed 100%, but it's much more likely that he will cultivate the mode of goodness, sattva guna. And if one does not study dharma, religious principles, then probably he'll be influenced by passion and ignorance. So these gunas are very important. Karana guna sangasya. By associating with the gunas, sad asad yoni, you get a good or a bad birth. What does that mean? For example, there are trees in Siberia. They're born. They're born. They take birth. They grow. They are maintained. They reproduce. Trees reproduce. Not by human means, but they have a seed that falls on the ground and another tree comes up. That's reproduction. And then they dwindle. They get old and they fall over. They live their whole life in the freezing cold. Whole life. So there are other examples, polar bears, sea lions, etc., etc. You get a good or a bad birth because of the results of your past activities, which in the Bible is, as you sow, so shall you reap. Karana guna sangasya sad asad. There's also a good birth, right? In a family of religious people, Suchinam Shrimatam Gehe. That's also from Bhagavad Gita. Suchinam, in the home of a pure family. Family, of course, because Gehe means home. Families live in homes. Suchinam Shrimatam. Shrimatam means wealthy. So we generally, the United States is a more wealthier country, or is a wealthier country than the other countries in the world. Of course, there are poor people here, but the poor people here have a car. You know, the poor people in India are sleeping on the road. Yeah. Of course, there are homeless people in this country also, but it's a small number compared to people who have a house and a car and all the comforts and wealth. So somebody's born in a poor family, that's a result of his karana guna sangasya sad asad. Asad yoni, a bad birth. Sad yoni, a good birth. Just like, you know, if someone's family can afford to send them to college, for example. Boy, I mean, I shouldn't tell you. Last night, you know, I was driving, we went to Evanston, and we came back and we were listening to the National Public Radio. And they were telling stories about people. One guy, the story they told, he was a bank robber, and in jail, he studied law and he became a lawyer. You know, there are stories like that. People can transform their lives. We have been given by God minute independence. What does that mean? We cannot stop death. Death is inevitable. This is what this verse is talking about, inevitable death. That's also in the Bhagavad Gita. Jatasya hi dhruvam mrityur. I mentioned that yesterday. Dhruvam janma mritasya cha. For one who is born, death is certain, and for one who dies, rebirth is certain. Why? Because the death means changing bodies, which is the subject of today's verse. We change our body. We cannot see that. It is beyond our power of perception. Then how can we understand? So the Vedic knowledge says that there are 3 types of evidence to understand truth. Pratyaksha pramanam, direct perception. Yeah, I can see someone is, for instance, a red shirt, a white sweater, a green jacket, you know, what is it? Maroon sweater, blue shirt. So we see these things, pratyaksha pramanam, round lights, yellow paint, golden paint. We see these things. And then there's anumanam. Anumanam is inference. If you see smoke, you know you can infer that there's a fire. That's the example given. So we infer something to be true by second-hand sight. And then there's Shabda Pramanam, which is the words of the Vedic literature. So therefore, the Vedic literature is considered the mother. Again, that we had that yesterday. Only the mother can tell you who is your father. Only mother knows who's father. So who is God, the absolute truth? The ancient Indian religion says the Vedas can tell you. The Vedas can tell you. So part of that knowledge is, how did we come here? Why were we born? What is the purpose? So the 4 purposes, I only mentioned one. dharma. But after dharma, there's artha and kama. And these are actually the most common activities of human society: economic development and sense gratification. We don't need a car, but we have a car, right? Somebody is coming here this morning who came here yesterday. He's my age. He's a little 4 months older than me, 63 years old. And he comes in the train. He sold his car. He's a painter. He's coming to do some painting as a voluntary service. So you don't need a car, but we're enjoying. It's called sense gratification. The food we eat is sense gratification. We don't need to eat so much. I also don't need to eat so much. That's my personal fault. Because the Vedic concept is you should eat only what you need to keep the body and soul together. Why is human life important? These 4 principles of human life apply only to human beings and not to the animals, the plants, the birds, the aquatics, the insects, and the reptiles, because human beings have higher intelligence that the animals don't have. The animals are alive. They have the same symptoms of life that we have. So there must be a soul. There must be the Atma, the soul. Otherwise, they'd be dead. They'd be like this table. They wouldn't have consciousness. So, but in human life, we have a higher consciousness, more developed brain power. So the soul works through that brain power. Just like a richer man, instead of having a cheap car, he has a more expensive car, he has an airplane. More facility. Human life is more facility, but if you examine the economic development and sense gratification is common among human beings and other living entities like the animals. They also struggle for making a comfortable life for themselves and then enjoying that, right? Like a squirrel puts away its food and then later on it eats the food. So that's economic development and sense gratification for an animal. And for a human being, accumulation of wealth is economic development, and then enjoying that wealth. Like, I don't know, in Evanston anyway, the schools are on the spring break. So people are enjoying their vacation, right? So what's the ultimate goal? Dharma, artha, and kama, religiosity, economic development, sense gratification. But in the end, the struggle for moksha, liberation. So what is liberation? So according to this Vedic concept, punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam. You are born again and you die again. That's what it says here. Today's verse. Moksha means to stop that. Stop rebirth. So Bhagavad Gita says, Bhagavad Gita means the song of God. And in the Gita, Lord Krishna, the incarnation of God, says to Arjuna, Anta kale chamameva smaran muktva kalevaram. At the time of death, if you remember me, then you are liberated from this material body once and for all. Gita also says, Yanti deva vrata devan. In the Vedic religion, which you call Hinduism, there are many demigods. Some people believe, or they propagate propaganda, that Hinduism has many gods. It's not true. There is one Supreme Lord that is called Ishvara in Sanskrit, Supreme Lord, Parameshvara, the controller of all the controllers. And under him there are demigods, devatas. So in Gita, Lord Krishna told Arjuna, Yanti Deva Vrata Devan. Those who worship the devatas, after they give up their body, they go to the devatas. We believe that there are many other planets. Vedic concept is that this is not the only planet where there is intelligent life. But by mechanical means, we cannot go to those other planets. So, Yanti Deva Vrata Devan, Pitrin Yanti Pitri Vrataha. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. There's a planet of the ancestors where the king of that planet is called Aryama. This ancestral worship you find in Asia. In the West, it's not so prominent, but in Japan, it's very prominent, and in India. Bhutani Yanti Bhutejya, and those who worship ghosts and spirits, they go to the ghosts and spirits. So that type of worship is tribal worship. We have tribals in India, and Africa is a tribal, right? Am I correct? You're of tribal descent. Don't worry, because if you can also attain the Gita says that anyone can attain the highest destination. He may have been born a tribal, or he may have been born in the higher classes, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, which I'm also not born in, by the way. So there, Mam hi partha, this is also Bhagavad Gita. Mam hi partha vyapashritya, those who take shelter of me, ye pisyu, even if papayonayaha, they were of a lower birth. Karana gunasangasya sadasadyoni, bad birth and good birth. So even those who are from a lower birth, tepi anti paragatim, they can also attain the highest destination. They can get liberation. So human life, there are different types of bodies. We don't say everyone is equal. A man cannot have a baby, so how are men and women equal? Right? It's not possible. And it's not true. It's false propaganda. And someone is younger, someone is older, someone is bigger, someone is taller. So what is this equality? Equality means actually respect for human life, or respect for all life. Why only human life? Those who respect life, they view with equality, and that's in the Gita. What's that? Pandita Samadarshinaha. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne, thank you very much. Those who have true knowledge. Sampanne, they have acquired true knowledge. Vidya Vinaya, and Vinaya, humility. Those who have acquired knowledge and humility. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne, Brahmine Gavi Hastini. In a Brahmana, in a cow, or in an elephant, Shuni Chaiva Shwapakecha. In a dog and in a dog eater. Yeah, there are people that eat dogs, right? Chinese and Filipinos. They have slaughterhouses for dogs in the Philippines. You may not know that. Now you know. Shuni Chaiva Shwapakecha Pandita Samadarshinaha. You know the word pandit? Pandit means a scholar. And it's an English word now. Samadarshinaha sees equally. What does he see? He sees the soul inside the body. The bodies are different, but the soul is equal in the sense that the soul is eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. We don't say that we're all one. We don't say. We are individual souls. Mamai vangsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha. There are unlimited souls that were created by God, and they are different. Vibhinangsha. differentiated from God. But they have the same qualities of God, which is eternality, Sat, Chit, consciousness, Ananda, bliss. The Supreme Soul, God, and all the individual souls have these common qualities. The difference is quantity. We are tiny, and He is unlimited, right? All powerful, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. We are not. So, we have somehow fallen into the material world. We believe that there's a spiritual world. Parastasmat tu bhavonyo vyakto vyaktat sanatanaha. In Gita, Bhagavad Gita, another verse. Beyond this world, there's another world. Parastasmat tu bhavonyo. Besides this world, there's another. Vyakto vyaktat sanatanaha. It's unmanifested and it's eternal. It's unmanifested to those in this world. So it's like someone in a jail cannot see outside of the jail. He's imprisoned. So we are imprisoned in these bodies, and we must go through the cycle of life and then give up this body. So at that moment, according to our consciousness and our activities, we'll get another body, or we may get liberation. So that's what it says. So we have 10 minutes for questions. That's the system. 8:30 is the end, and it's 8:21. And this is called the Dharma of, what is it? The time frame. Observe the Dharma of the time frame here. Correct? So if anyone has a question, this is the time. There's a mic for anybody who wants to ask. Oh, we have a question here by Jai Baladev Prabhu, right?
Yeah. Correct. Thank you for your class, Vasu Ghosh Prabhu. Prabhupada mentioned in the purport brainwashing.
Yeah.
So sometimes people say this is a brainwashing movement, but Prabhupada would say, yes, it is. There's nothing wrong with the clean brain.
Right.
He would usually say that.
Actually, when this was, I didn't speak about that because I thought the topic of the Atma, the soul, is more important. But at the time when this was written, this is a time and circumstance explanation. So this institution was being accused of brainwashing people, but we must be honest. We're not brainwashing people, but we're propagating, which is called proselytization. We're propagating the Vedic message, the message of the Vedic literature. So somebody who doesn't know what the Vedic literature is, out of ignorance, called it brainwashing and indoctrination. That's not exactly what we were doing. We didn't capture people and torture them and waterboarding and all that stuff to make them, come around to our viewpoint. But what the Gita teaches, we have lectures like this, and on our own we also study. That's called Swadhyaya, study on your own Vedic literature. And so this in India is the religion for thousands of years. It was also the religion of what we call the Greater India, which were the countries around India. But by force, coercion over the last few thousand years, to at least since the time of Buddha, 2,500 years, there have been changing concepts. But before Buddha, there was the Vedic religion. There's a hand up over here. We can come back to you? Or you want to
ask my question.
Okay. You're next.
So my point was related to this point. You actually made the point that we should cultivate how to clean the brain. We should cultivate the mode of goodness, sattva guna. And so we see in the material world, whether we're a good person or not depends on our circumstances. When we're in the spotlight, we're all good. When someone else is in the spotlight, we're envious. When someone honors us, we're all good. When someone insults us, we become vengeful. And so that verse, you know, Lord Shiva spoke about Chitta-Ketu. How does it go? Narayana parasarvena kutaschana bibhyati. Swarga apavarga narakeshu api tulyartha darshinaha. Absolutely. So he was saying our goodness is in all circumstances, good and bad. So this is one of my favorite quotes. It says, ships don't sink because of the water around them. Ships sink because of the water that gets in them. We can't stop everything on the outside, opposition, criticism, rumors, traffic. But if we allow what's on the outside to get on the inside, then we'll sink into vengeance, depression, fear, anger. So my question is related to this. There's so many beautiful verses and quotes in the Bible and in the Bhagavatam. But how does one make information turn into transformation? Because we see people who are in spiritual life, they still act like the same people in the material world with envy, vengeance, you know, despite reading thousands of hours of Bhagavatam Bible every day. So how does one make that step from transforming information to transformation? So
that's called self-control, and that's in the Gita 6.5. Udharet atmanatmanam atmanam avasadayet atmaiva hi atmano bandhur atmaiva ripuratmanaha. One must uplift himself by his own mind. The mind can be the best friend or the worst enemy. So the bad qualities you described, what were the words again? Envy, vengeance. These are bad qualities that the mind may become totally absorbed in. You know, there's, I don't want to quote something. Recently I saw a movie, and in the movie, it's a true story. One man says to the other man, what do you want? Two words, revenge. Did you see that movie? Who saw that? No? Should I recommend that? Mark Felt. You heard of that? Mark Felt? No? None of you? Deep Throat. You heard of Deep Throat? He was Mark Felt. He was the deputy director of the FBI when Hoover passed away. So he had a rival who was corrupt and who was expelled from the FBI. So that guy came to him and he asked him, what do you want? He said two words, revenge. Obviously it's one word, but it was funny. So people become absorbed. Revenge, vengefulness, enviousness, because they couldn't control their mind. That's the point. They couldn't control their mind. Udaret, uplift. You must uplift atman atmanam, the mind by the mind. Udaret atman atmanam, atmanam avasadayet. Atmaiva hi atmano, the mind can be your best friend if you can control it by your intelligence. The intelligence is the discriminating factor of the mind, Prabhupada said. Right, Mataji. It's working. It's on. Oh, did you turn it off? You turned it off? Oh, no. Okay.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for your wonderful lecture. And thank you, Baldev Prabhuji, for the eye-opening questions. Prabhuji, you just said about Swadhyaya and being a graduate student, so I cannot attend all the lectures, so I have to manage my time, and all I can do is Swadhyaya whenever I have time.
Self-study.
So, and while I was reading, there were a couple of places where I, being a student of linguistics, so sometimes I just look at the literal meaning of the sentences and words, and in a couple of places, the sentences would be these practices, and even women can do this practice. Or in the example where Sati Devi had to give up her life, and in one of the purports it said, it was written, if she had obeyed her husband's, Lord Shiva's instruction she wouldn't have to give her life. So it's all about womanly behavior and weaknesses of women and blah blah. So and I talked about this to a couple of senior, because I'm just a neophyte devotee. I have just stepped into this movement, and I asked a couple of senior devotees, and I was advised to read the scriptures in association with the senior devotees, which I cannot always do. So I have to self-study sometimes. And how do I justify my mind, or which became a bit rebellious after that? Or how come that in such great scriptures the sentences are written in that way, and then Papa Yoni, how can we say that a woman's birth is a sinful birth, or Papa Yoni, or why is the word even used there? Even women can use this or do this. Right. Means, could you please help me understand that, Prabhu? And I apologize if I...
No, nothing. What you say, there's nothing wrong in what you're saying. Everyone may have a doubt or a question, and it has to be answered. So, according to the Vedic concept, there are good and bad births. So I gave the example of a tree in Siberia. So that's a very extreme example. But let's say aquatics, let's say the fish, they're born. We can take all of the species, you see. So, for instance, we have birds living in this cold climate. They don't have a woolen, you're wearing a sweater. We have heating, you have a jacket. These animals, they don't have that advantage. They're suffering. So why are they suffering? Because of their past activities, you see? So someone may say, well, what did I do wrong to have a bad birth? Is that the question? Yeah, well, we didn't follow dharma, religiosity. That's in previous lives. So we had to suffer. We had to be born in a family. For instance, the other story I heard on the National Public Radio was a girl who was born to drug addicts. Her parents were drug addicts. And she got in a lot of trouble. Very checkered story they told within 5 minutes on the radio last night. So, I mean, I don't want to get into all the details of the story because it got even worse and then it got better. But somebody who's born in unfortunate circumstances, it's all not, black and white. It's 256 shades of gray. Like in Africa, you might be born in a king. They have this movie, Black Panther, right? It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy movie. But it shows that there was a hierarchy in the tribal society. And so someone who was born the son of a king, Suchinam Srimatam, he did something good to be born the son of a king. And, there was a picture on the internet of Ringo Starr, you all know him, who was knighted recently. He was made a knight by Prince William. So Prince William is a young guy, right? And Ringo Starr is like almost 80 years old. What is he, 78, 79? I don't know. He's quite elderly. So he's bowing down in front of the prince. So what does it prove? The prince had a good birth as, royalty. He did something good. Everyone is not Prince William or Prince Harry or, there's royalty all over the world in different societies. So being born, say, the son of Bill Gates, right? He has a couple kids. Warren Buffett has 3 sons, is it? Or Walmart, how many children? He had 9 children. All of them are billionaires. So they did something good to get that wealth, right? Doesn't that make sense? It doesn't. And there are people born in the home of, ignorant laborers in India, you might have seen, and whole life they're doing labor. Well, that's not only in India. It's in Russia is a very poor country. I've been I've traveled in Russia, and people are very poor outside of Moscow. Moscow is like, you know, Chicago or New York. But outside, it's like India. It's a poor place. But it's cold. It's damn cold. And all you can eat there are cabbages and, you know, potatoes, basically. I mean, the climate is such. So there's a good place to be and a bad place to be. Does that make sense? Does it make sense?
Prabhuji, it makes complete sense, but does it mean that birth in women body is because of bad?
Why are women considered a lower birth? That's your question.
Yeah, why?
That is your question. To have a child is very difficult, painful. You're not a mother. You're a mother. You have 2 children. So you know better. I mean, my better half, my wife is sitting here in the back. We have 5 children and 4 grandchildren. Yeah, ये मेरी धर्म पत्नी है. हम ये महाराष्ट्र के, आप बॉम्बे के हैं, ये भी महाराष्ट्र के हैं, लेकिन आप मराठी भाषा, आपका भाषा मराठी नहीं है. So आप हिंदी समझते हैं? You know Hindi. To have a child is extremely painful. You feel like you're dying. And again, you know, and really, Vedic concept is that every woman should have 10 sons. Lord Krishna had 16,000 wives, and each wife had 10 sons, according to the Bhagavatam, the same book we're reading here today. So it's a curse in a sense. You understand the point? You have to suffer that pain. Men don't have to suffer. So it's considered a punishment in a sense. You may be the queen. Draupadi was a queen. Kunti Devi was a queen. Sita Devi was a queen. So there are different levels of womanhood. But to have to suffer and then the menstrual cycle, it's a curse. You know, men don't have to. So it's considered a lower birth in that way. But you have human intelligence. So Krishna says in Gita that even women, and he considers Shudras, who are men, and Vaishyas, who are men, to be a lower birth. Or tribals. And we are Malechas and Yavanas, Westerners. We're also tribals in a sense. Right? That's the history of Europe. They were tribes. So it's not that, oh, I've got a lower birth, so I can't get moksha. I cannot get liberation. But Gita says you can get liberation. A woman may get liberation and a man may not. Yes, why not? If you follow dharma, artha, kama, and up till moksha, and you fulfilled the criterion for liberation from the repetition of birth and death, and many men won't fulfill that criterion, so they won't get liberated. So it may be better. But generally we're saying a woman's body is because of some sin in a past life. That's what the Vedic concept is. You have to suffer childbirth, a man doesn't. So that's a result of some kind of, it's a punishment. Yeah, it's a punishment. Having a menstrual cycle every month, a punishment. It's miserable. Yeah, it's miserable. We need the mic to go back to Professor Bhatia here. Oh, they keep turning it off. I don't know. They want to save battery power.
I have a personal question for you.
Sure, please. You could sit down if you want. Yeah.
You were sharing about your background and that you joined the movement, I think you said in 1973,
yeah.
the Hare Krishna movement.
Right.
So you're American, obviously. Either you came out of Christianity or you came out of Judaism.
Right.
Correct. I'm curious, interested in hearing what attracted you to the Hare Krishna movement, and I assume that you've converted to Hinduism.
Right.
So what attracted you to Hinduism?
Bhagavad Gita, really. You know, those were the hippie days. Of course, I was a high school hippie, if you want to call it that. I wasn't, you know, I was living at home with my parents, with my mother. My father abandoned the family. That's another story. You know, everyone comes in their life, every human being wonders, who am I? Where have I come from? Where am I going? What's my actual identity? So that we call in Sanskrit jigyasa, inquisitiveness. So that led me, I read different books, I associated with different people. I will admit in hindsight, looking back on it all, that those associations and those books were very brief. Although, you know, we had Bible study. I'll admit I'm from the Jewish side, but we were more, you know, our upbringing was secular, wasn't so religious, but we had some religion like a spice, you know, thrown in there. And English was our language from childhood. My parents spoke English. My grandfathers were born in Europe, but my paternal grandfather was born in Liverpool and raised in Wales, so his language was English. And in this inquisitiveness at that time, going here and there, the temple here, ISKCON, Hare Krishna, had opened in Evanston. And a friend in the school had a small book called Easy Journey to Other Planets. And then I started visiting with the excuse of buying incense. And then in December of '72, I got the Gita, Bhagavad Gita by Prabhupada with his commentary. I had another edition of Gita, Annie Besant, if you heard of Annie Besant. And I started to read it, and the names just threw me for a loop. Because the first chapter of Gita is, there's a lot of names of warriors on a battlefield. And unless it's explained properly, for a Westerner, you just become totally puzzled. Prabhupada, what I did was I read the entire Gita, the translation of Prabhupada, and then I read half of the purports, half of the explanations. And I started visiting the temple there in Evanston. It was an old YMCA. It was the African-American YMCA, segregated in the past, that was purchased by ISKCON at the time. And I started hearing the Gita lectures in the night. And then somebody said, why don't you come and move in for 3 days? 3 days went to a week went to a month. And here I am 45 years later. Tanmadye samskrita bhashayaha sampadanam kritaham eteyapi samskrita adhyapakaha. I can converse. Doesn't mean I know the whole language. Bhartalapaha sambhashanam karomi samskritena. Ye jananti taihi sakam bhartalapaha bhavati. Kintu sampurna samskrita bhashya jnanam nasti. Yataha sagaram eva bhavati. It's like an ocean. I couldn't grasp the whole Sanskritam. But I talk in Sanskritam. Just like Hindi mein baat chalte hain. और अंग्रेजी में बात चलते हैं, संस्कृत में बातचीत होते हैं, गुजराती भाषा, हम गुजरात में रहते हैं तो छूटी फूटी काम चलाओ गुजराती बोलता हूँ. So yeah, I mean, we're still students. I don't say, you know, I'm a professor. Somebody has to sit here and give a lecture, but we're still learning.
I too am a student, and that's why we're here, to learn from just observe and learn this morning. Your Hindi is very good. One follow-up question. So as a former Jew and as a Hindu now,
right?
What do you think of the person of Jesus, the Christ?
Personally, I feel that we're all children of God. And so that the concept of one exclusive Son of God is illogical. That having been said, the principles of goodness that Jesus spread are wonderful. Peace, brotherhood, all compassion, love. The thing is that even in Hinduism and in the Western religions, our particular sect, which is called Vaishnavism, which you're familiar with that, we believe that we should not kill animals. Nobody should kill animals. Animal killing is a lack of compassion, a lack of love. And we believe that it's tamasic, in the mode of ignorance. So there's a reaction for that. So in the Bible, there are 10 commandments. I think that's in the Old Bible. If you want to call it, the Christians call it the Old Bible, the Jewish Bible. So thou shalt not kill. So they make an interpretation, well, thou shalt not murder. Now, what's the original? You know, I'm not a scholar of that, tell you the frank truth. The difference between killing and murder is supposedly killing a human being. So abortion is killing a human being, for instance. We believe that. We are anti-abortion, like many Christians. And so there are many similarities. But as far as the basis of knowledge, converting to Hinduism means you accept Vedic knowledge. So as more ancient and more complete. So it's not a question of hatred or enviousness or... it's just, this is the tradition in India. This is the tradition, but you may call it a Brahminical tradition because the Brahmanas were the ones who upheld the religion. They studied the books, Patana, and they taught the society. So, yeah, it's in that sense, it's Brahminical, but in a strict sense, or you want to call it, what's the word? There are different words you would call it, conservative or whatever. We wouldn't be accepted. We aren't accepted by some because they say you have to actually be born into a particular family. There are many in Hinduism that do not accept that, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who we follow. Even Ramanujacharya, you know, he had a disciple who was from a lower caste. And when he went for a bath in the morning, he would put his hand on his Brahmin disciples, and after the bath, he would touch that lower caste disciple. So there was, how can he do that? Because he was a Brahmin, and the Brahmins were very orthodox, or is that the word? Orthodox? Dogmatic. So he said, no, he's a real bhakta, he's a devotee. And so when someone becomes a devotee of God, that is the bhakti marg, the path of devotion. So I think Jesus taught like that, the path of devotion to God. As far as I understand, I admittedly have not made a deep study of the, you know, the new Bible, the Christian Bible. But you know, we get something. We get something, a general idea. I guess it's about a year ago, attended a Baptist service in, what's the name of that place? Jonesburg, Arkansas. People are a lot more religious down in the South. If you go around the building, you'll see a car with a Mississippi license plate. That's me. Because this institution has a farm 75 miles north of New Orleans. And so it's a long story, but I had some connection last year there. It's 1,200 acres. And I moved around a little, and I met these Christian students, and they invited me to their Baptist church. And I heard their service, and then we had some interaction that went on for like 45 minutes. So, you know, there's a lot of ground for common ground between us. There's a lot of common ground. Where we disagree is animal killing and animal eating, basically. Otherwise, there's a lot love of God, and God is the supreme, and we're His servants, and it's very similar. Yes. We are multicultural here because, you know, we have India, we have African American, and he's Latin American from
Colombia.
Colombia. Okay.
Actually, Srila Prabhupada encouraged people from other faiths, you don't have to change your own faith. Just implement what you believe with the Vedic knowledge, and you will understand how you will worship in the proper way God. And I don't know if you can...
well, that's true. What you're saying is true.
Extend a little bit more on Sanatana Dharma, which is that we accept everybody. We're not just saying, oh, we are the only way, you know, as the Bible, since Tame Memorial says, just through Jesus, but we attain salvation. But
Prabhupada, if you go through his life, their conversations were recorded with a number of clerics, Christian clerics. He met Catholics, he met Protestants, and he had, you call it interreligious dialogue. So that could be studied. That needed, you'd have to research a bit to see, you know, what he said. But
yeah, and
he did say that. I mean, he had both. Obviously, he made people followers of Vedic, the Vedic thought and the Vedic culture. So that's why we changed our dress or changed our names, etc. But he did, like you said, encourage people, follow your religion, but don't kill animals. He was on that point unwavering. Killing means eating the killed animals is part of that, the karma. I think we went way over the time. I have to beg a pardon from the authorities here and thank them for their tolerance. And I hope I didn't say anything untoward. I've represented our tradition to the best of my ability. Of course, we're all human beings and we have our imperfections. Should we close it then? Any other question? The students didn't ask any question though. Have any questions? No? Okay. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. That's how we end it. And thank you for your attentiveness and attention. Hare Krishna. Yes, you see, I'm not perfect and we have limited time, but you know, it's a good point. I didn't say it's eternal principles. I said it's the Vedic. Spoke a little Sanskrit. Yeah. Oh, Krishna.